question for today is, what do you feel about the institution of marriage? And the reason we're asking this question is because there seems to be more of a tendency towards several long-term relationships with the modern generation, and we're just asking people what their feelings are about that, about divorce and separation and long-term relationships, and just the institution of marriage and how sacred it is in general. And that's our question for this week.
Well, I think people are meant to be together, and in our culture, marriage is still, for a lot of people, based on religion, and I think that excludes a lot of people. The idea of marriage is really nice, to find somebody you can spend the rest of your life with, but I fear that people do it because they're afraid of being alone, and I think maybe that's why we have such a high divorce rate. People jump into things. I also think, though, that marriage excludes a lot of groups. For example, homosexuals. A lot of places they still can't get married, and that's love, just like any other love. So the institution of marriage, I don't think it's that great anymore.
I don't know. I don't really believe in marriage. I don't know if it's like a fear of marriage, but it's more along the lines of, like, I think it's deteriorated to a point like marriage isn't a necessity anymore. So why get married? Like, if you can prove your love in other ways, like, it's not. That idea that it has to be legally binding, I think, is kind of out of the picture. I mean, I think it's kind of silly nowadays to be able to. I mean, I know very few marriages have stayed together, and those who have aren't necessarily healthy. So.
I myself, I've been in a committed relationship with someone now for 7 years. We've been living together that long, and we're not married. And we like it that way, and we don't see at this point too many reasons for changing that. So, do I believe in the institution of marriage? Well, you know, it works well for some folks, but not for others.
My personal belief is that now it's more of something you do for somebody else as a gesture to them. As far as what public opinion is, I believe it's more of a technicality. People are doing it just to say, have it down on paper. With all these prenuptial agreements, I think that's dodging what marriage is. I think that's just saying, okay, for now we'll make it legal, and then like later when I want to leave you, I know what's mine, I'll take it with me. And I don't agree with those. I mean, I wouldn't want to marry somebody who'd want a prenuptial agreement.
I still feel that it's a very important institution. I think that the fact that people are not getting married or are living together and still having children is one of the big problems with, you know, all the troubled kids going into gangs and different things. And, you know, my parents stayed together. They had 12 kids, and, you know, none of us thank God, got into any crime or anything. And I think I wish it would come back. I wish it was, you know, still a more, you know, popular thing, because I think it's a very stabilizing influence in society.
I think it's individually based and based on how you were raised and your own sort of values. But in the country in general, it's definitely, I mean, it's kind of shattered. It's kind of going to hell. Generally speaking, you know, divorce rates are just astronomical and that sort of thing. But my own personal views on it, I really believe in the institution of marriage, and, you know, hope when I get married it's going to be forever.
When most people think of marriage, they think of the actual signing of the agreement and walking down the aisle and the wedding, and it's more or less the spiritual commitment that you make, and I think it's very important.
Well, I disagree. I don't think marriage is you know, getting outdated. I think actually it's making a comeback. I think sort of America is, at least if maybe not, you know, the youth of America right now, but sort of the mainstream of America is taking it more and more seriously. I think it's something we have to enter into a little bit more carefully. Long-term relationships are tougher and tougher to maintain, but I don't think they're any less valuable. And I think that actually America's starting to value those sorts of relationships more and more.
Marriage is good. You know, it's a long-term relationship. Because in a long-term relationship, if you feel like if you want to split up, you can easily do that. But if you're married, you would think about it and then try to work it out instead of just breaking it up.
The institution of marriage has always been as valuable as the participants want it to be. So whether you're married for all your life or you have several relationships before you're married, once you're married, that requires a commitment between you and your partner that will make it a lasting relationship. So I just see it as basically something you want to foster, something you want to grow, and not something that you just want to fit into.
Yeah, I think I agree that marriage these days is taken more loosely, but I wish it wasn't, because it's a really secure thing, and it should be that way. It shouldn't have ambiguity in it, you know. And I hope when I get married that it's forever. You know, I don't want any chance of a divorce or anything. So I think it's true that today it is taken totally lightly and just like another step after dating or going out, and I think that's wrong. I wish it was the way it used to be, more old-fashioned, kind of like forever. Like my grandparents just had their 50th anniversary, and it was rad. We all went around the table and said special things about them, and it was so great. They've influenced my parents, who are still married, and that's the way it should be. So.
What do I think about the institution of marriage? Well, I got married when I was 19. I'm 32. I've been married 13 years, successfully, I suppose. I have a child, and so I don't think people take seriously marriage. When my wife and I got married, we didn't have a value system that really gave us the option of divorce, and therefore we worked through stuff, you know, even when it got really tough, you know, because. And in that sense, I think that there's a lot of folks that don't have a really deep sense of commitment to marriage. I suppose there's a whole lot of reasons for that. But, you know, that's one of the things I think about marriage. And that concerns me. It concerns me that people feel that way, because to me, I think that society in general needs some kind of structure to it, and the family is really a basic part of a successful society, in my opinion. So I don't mean to get into, you know, a lot of deep philosophy about this, but it's concerned me for a very long time that we have divorce rates as high as we do, that we have, you know, that we have venereal disease rates as high as we do, that AIDS is the epidemic that it is right now. I don't know how that all applies to marriage. But it seems to me that if someone has a commitment to monogamy in marriage, it would factor out a lot of these problems, you know. And the other aspect, of course, is with reference to our children, you know. What are we teaching our children about life and the importance of life and the importance of trust, and what kind of stability are we giving to our children, you know. One of the things divorce does is it divides families, you know, and what's that going to do to our children when they're 6 or 7 or 9 or 13 and one parent finally just leaves, you know? I mean, it seems to me there's a lot of questions that need to be asked about the greater good of my children, of my community, of my spouse, you know, not just me. But the flip side of that is that you got to kind of factor in the selfish side too. You got to figure out how to, you know, meet your own personal needs. So it's a very complicated thing. From 13 years of experience, all I can tell you is that it hasn't always been easy. It hasn't always been enjoyable, but in the long run, I have a certain amount of stability that I've come to count on, and my child counts on, my spouse counts on, and I think that kind of stability is something that society needs.
We've been here today at the coffee house, near the coffee house on the UCD campus, and you heard plenty of responses about what people feel about the institution of marriage. And that concludes this week's segment of Street Talk. Have a good day. Bye.